But Melanie, welcome to Australia, and tell us right up front your thoughts on the Gaza deal. Can it work? Is it the way forward?
I don't know whether Mr. Trump actually means precisely what he has said, or whether he's used it as a kind of leverage in the negotiations he's trying to conduct with Saudi Arabia and other Arab states. If it is true that he means it, it's quite difficult to see how in practice it can be put into practice. But I think that's not really the point. The point is that he's changed the conversation in the right kind of way. And in my view, it needs to be changed still further. The idea that the Gazans need to be moved out is only part of the story. The idea that the Palestinians as such are a cause that is worthy is one that has to be scotched. It is a misapprehension based on a set of historical illusionary facts that are not facts at all, that has actually driven the Middle East into war for the last century, and has in my view, knocked the entire Western liberal intelligentsia off the moral rails completely. There is no such thing as the Palestinian people. The idea of a Palestine state was never wanted by them. It was devised as part of the explicitly named strategy of stages in order to be a staging point in order to destroy Israel. It is based on Islamic holy war to get rid of the Jews, to get rid of Israel as the Jewish homeland, as a precursor to destroying the West civilization and replacing it by Islamic rule. And consequently, the adoption of the Palestine cause has distorted everything. Basically, what's happened for the last 100 years is that the West has rewarded Palestinian genocidal aggression against the State of Israel and against the Jewish people by promises that they will have a state of their own, by telling them in terms that they're entitled to a state of their own. Now, if you're saying that people who are bent on genocide are entitled to something, then you have lost the moral plot completely, and you incentivize more war, more terror, resulting in, what we all saw on October the 7th. An act of unspeakable barbarity and sadism conducted against Jews as Jews, although others than Israeli Jews were involved as well. So this is an essential precursor, in my view, to saying to the Palestinians as a whole, you're over, you're finished. We don't support this cause. We identify now this cause as utterly bogus. You will get nothing from us in future. There is not going to be a state. You are not entitled to a state. You are not entitled to any more funding from us until you stop this campaign of terror and murder against Israel and the Jewish people. You will get no diplomatic recognition from us. Now, this would be an absolute revolution. It's elementary moral and political reality as far as I'm concerned. But the fact is, it is so thoroughly embedded in the whole Western mindset that there is a Palestinian people, there has to be a Palestinian state, that's the route to peace, that it's almost impossible to envisage that happening. What Trump has done by moving the discourse in the way that he has over Gaza, and we've seen the reaction to that, I would hope that's the precursor to some sanity finally emerging over this whole issue.
Rita.
What is the attitude in the Middle East to relationships with Israel being normalised without Palestinian statehood? Because for decades, that was the view in the West, that you could not normalise those relationships without the Palestinian issue being resolved and with a two-state solution. Is that attitude changed in the Middle East?
The short answer is, I don't know. People talk at different levels to different audiences and say different things, and they don't necessarily mean what they say. We do know that Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf states have a problem with what's called the Arab Street, a tremendous amount of visceral, fundamental hatred of Israel and the Jews, which in past decades and centuries, they have themselves unleashed. They are responsible for this. Now, we are led to believe, and I believe this is true, that among the Gulf states, put aside Qatar for a moment, Qatar is a rogue state which is identified with the Hamas, with the Muslim Brotherhood. But the other Gulf states and Saudi Arabia understand, we are led to believe, and I believe this is true, that their future and the future of their countries depends upon good relations with Israel. And they wish to normalize those relations. To a large extent, they have been normalized in the last few years. Saudi Arabia has still to come on board. Now, they are, as you say, still saying in public, nothing can happen without a Palestine state. They don't want a Palestine state. They hate the Palestinians, the Palestinian Arabs. The Arab world loathes and detests the Palestinian Arabs. They don't want them anywhere near them. The only people in the world who support the Palestinian Arabs are the Western liberals, unfortunately. Unfortunately for us, that the Western liberals support them. So, I don't believe that they want a Palestine state. The Saudis and the Gulf states would understand that a Palestine state would be a threat to themselves. So, they have to say this. Now, I think that they want, they want to see the people of Gaza and the territories of what's called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. They want to see them treated decently. They don't want to see them, abused in any way. But on the other hand, I think that they would be open to a settlement of this whole issue, which falls short of a Palestine state, and would accommodate them in other ways.
Well, Melanie, I want to just get back to what you just said a moment ago about Western liberals and they're being the ones who really support the Palestinian cause the most. And I mean, we've seen it in London, we've seen it across the cities, here in Australia and the United States. They actually don't just seem to support the Palestinian cause, but also seem to have a fair bit of sympathy, if not encouragement, for Hamas. Is this part of a kind of a suicidal urge on the part of the left and a sort of self-hatred of the Western civilization that brought them the liberties that they enjoy? And is there a sort of a strange kind of weird perverse pleasure they take in sort of supporting people who would treat them just the same way as they treated these Hamas captives that we've seen released under the most horrific circumstances every week?
Well, I think this is absolutely to the point, and it is indeed the point of my book, which Rowan very kindly mentioned, The Builder's Stone, which is published just in the middle of last month, that one can't understand the behaviour of the Western liberals on this matter unless one understands it in the context of the all-out onslaught mounted by the Western liberal intelligentsia over many decades against the whole idea of Western civilization, which we're told, was born in the original sins of colonialism and oppression and white privilege and all the rest of it. And that belief has led to an onslaught on all the institutions, the core institutions that keep the cultural show on the road, the education system, the traditional family, the very idea of the nation, and on its fundamental moral values. And one of the results of that onslaught has been the doctrine that says, of cultural relativism, the doctrine that says that you cannot say that Western civilization is any better than any other, and therefore you cannot criticize any other civilization or any other culture, such as the Islamic world, such as the whole of the developing world, because if you do, as a Westerner, criticize it in any way and hold it responsible for its misdeeds, you are guilty of racism. And so the Palestinian Arabs have been perceived in this way to be the victims of colonial oppression by Israel. This is a complete lie. It is actually Arab colonialism against which Israel is fighting. The intention by the Palestinian Arabs to take over Israel, to exterminate the Jewish homeland and turn it into an Islamic state. But to the Western liberal mind, this is actually resistance. They are entitled to resist what the Western liberal perceives as Israeli colonialism by a resistance movement of which the Hamas is one. And so it is a complete moral deformation of the Western liberal mind based on what they're doing to their own countries. This whole idea of victim culture in our own countries, in Australia, in Britain, in which people who purport to be the members of a victim group, they define themselves as victims and they define everybody else as an oppressor. they are considered to be untouchable. When they do something wrong, they are considered to be untouchable. They can't be held responsible for doing the wrong thing because they are oppressed by the oppressor. And it is the oppressor who might be white people, might be men, might be heteronormative people, or whatever, who are responsible. And for these purposes, and this is the really terrible kicker as far as the Jewish communities are concerned, Jews are considered to be white oppressors. Now, in Israel, most Jews are not white, actually, believe it or not. Most Israelis are brown or black-skinned. Most Jews are brown or black-skinned, but they're considered to be white because they're considered to be oppressors. And so Jews are considered to be white oppressors, not just in Israel, but in the West. Why? Because Jews, says the modern progressive ho-ho liberal, Jews control everything. They control the economy.
Which is, of course, Melanie,
the banks.
Which takes us straight back to the original tropes of anti-Semitism and of Hitler and the Nazis,
Precisely.
which is why it was so disturbing to see those three poor men released today. Melanie Phillips, enjoy the rest of your trip in Australia. It's great to have you here. You're a great speaker and a great thinker, one of the great thinkers of the modern era, and I urge you outsiders, viewers, to buy Melanie's book, The Builder's Stone, How Jews and Christians Built the West.